With these melodies, we bless also the sacred cultures of the West, from Canada, North America, all the way to the Andes of South America. We bless the sacred cultures as we come together. The time when the tribes of the earth are being gathered, a time that a new cosmology is being introduced into the public consciousness of the world, a time that the keys of Enoch are being fulfilled. And so today we invite you throughout the world to join us on this, the 45th anniversary of receiving the keys of Enoch and Metatron for the advancement of humanity and the preparation for the kingdom of light. May we all be blessed and we converge in unity.
Right, so we want to thank everyone for joining us on the 45th anniversary of the Keys of Enoch. And it really tells us, what do the keys say really to us? That first, we are not alone. It talks about the many realms of intelligence, that's number 2. Those of the light and those who are learning. And I say that because we want to say that there's a multitude of beings of intelligence. Now, of course, when the Keys of Enoch came out 45 years ago, there were a lot of questions on this. And I find that in the 45 years, there's been a vast amount of knowledge. So that I believe everyone who's listening even tonight have seen really how the keys are right on in many of its
predictions and scientific statements and insights of future science, which is science guided by consciousness. Now, with each of these affirmations, we have a cosmogram, which is seen on the screen. If you're watching us, is the tree of life, but also you see the pattern of the garment covering Mother Earth. This is called by various names and traditions, including the term we use, Gematria Gaia, which is the sacred geometry of Mother Earth, awakening humanity to see the promise of new identity and purpose.
And the third point on this is we are being watched and held by divine intelligence. And this is so important now, 45 years later, because there's so many things taking place on planet Earth that it's really important that we realize that we are simply not alone. We're not out here on some planet in the middle of nowhere really fending for ourselves. That is not reality. Reality is that there are many beings that are around, that are watching, that are helping, that are giving us insights. And that really was the essence of the keys 45 years ago, that science would speed up, consciousness would speed up, and then people would have the understanding of that reality.
What we are showing is a series of documents from various parts of the world in the gathering of the tribes, quote unquote, the humanity of light. What we see now on our screen is one of our recent visits to Mexico, Chichen Itza, and the Yucatan Peninsula, where we gathered looking at the astronomic knowledge at Chichen Itza, but also with leading archaeologists exploring work connecting the grid points of the historic cultures in the area of what we will call in the Keys of Enoch, Zarahemla, the westernmost part of what in Greek mythology was considered the Atlantean Empire, reaching across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World, according to some scholars. Here in Mayapan, we conducted one of our major conferences, and if you look very carefully in the background, you can see one of the pyramidal temples. You see the gathering and the use of sacred music to activate these temples.
Right, so we were just in Mexico, and we're showing you just a few of the pictures that we did with our Mexican and American counterparts. We do this once a year in November, although this was a unique time because we went to Merida and were able to go to some of these sacred areas. One of the interesting things that we did while we were there, and just a few of us, we couldn't take everyone, was to realize that in the Yucatan, not only do you have waterways that are under the ground, but you actually have really labyrinths of tunnels. And so here you see Dr. Hurtak and I in some of these underground tunnels. in the Yucatan. And really, they're abundant. And most of them are natural, but they had been used from even the pre-Mayan culture, which is culture the Mayans prior to the time of Christ or around the time of Christ.
In the Keys of Enoch, we use the term Altea. Altea is a reference now to those cultures that were built along the western side of the Atlantic that are connected with vast underground labyrinthian systems, such as caves and corridors of crystal. We see one here, and this speaker with Dr. Desiree and associates are walking through one of the underground passages.
Yeah, you may recall Paul Burns is there, and then we also have Jose Santiago and our friend George Sanchez.
Anyway, what we're saying is we are now seeing the fulfillment in key 215 and 216 of underground passages. In this case, this particular labyrinthian system connects with no less than 35 pyramids. And so you're walking underneath the pyramids. You're walking through passages and areas of civil engineering that encompass more than 50 square kilometers of underground technology and underground human civilization that was there at an earlier cycle of history before the mythology of Atlantis or the great story of the flood, sinking various cities along the Atlantic as well as the Pacific area.
So let's go above ground, and here's some of our friends. Not everyone was here for the picture, but this is Uxmal. This is the area where a lot of these tunnels and underground structures are, although they're not available for the public for the most part. But this is an amazing complex as well.
If you climb to the top of the pyramid of Uxmal, you see something like a French bathtub that is there. It's representing a boat or a vehicle to commemorate the survivors of a great cataclysm or flood that took place in the Pacific when the motherland was sunk. The survivors, according to Enoch, who was the angelic source of my experience in 1973, said that survivors came across by boats into what we would call the New World of the Americas, and they built these pyramids on top of other pyramids over many generations to illustrate the staircase to the heavens, the staircase to regions of safety, the staircase that would vibrate according to certain sounds. And so the inner cycle of science here also connects with the sacred modalities of music, which allow the pyramids to vibrate, for people to go into altered and creative states of consciousness.
And you go to Tikal, I think we've shown this in some of our audio tapes, and Dr. Jack was on top of one of the pyramids, and when you're standing at the bottom, you actually not only heard him, but you heard a female voice, and it wasn't me, actually singing because of the vibration that was able to be created from these temples.
So these melodies are part of the induction process that is also part of how these temples or pyramids were used as a schooling of the soul. The pyramids, we were told by Enoch, were also creating vortex for the vehicles of light to return to specific places on the planet where experiments of humanity were in process.
But you know, the Keys of Enoch also talk about higher technology, and of course we feel that that technology was used by the ancients. It was known most likely in Egypt, in Mexico, and
India, and China, of course. And here we see a drawing we made years ago by one of our students in the area of El Mirador, which is right on the border between Guatemala and Mexico. It represents one of the largest complexes in the world.
It also looks like Teotihuacan. In general, it was, what were these pyramids doing? Why were they there? And we feel that they really were at least intended originally as space platforms. Basically, the reason why we show this is because according to Key 113, verse 30, Enoch told me that when the Melchizedek light centers of this planet are built, there will be energy fields which will work with the levels of electromagnetic conversion. This will be used to take energy out of the air and use it for physical activity. This activity will be sustained as a perpetual pulse. Well, so we want to know, if we're talking about 45 years of the Keys of Enoch, what has happened in those years? Well, what we see on the top here is a man who sadly died last year, actually November 2016, John Bedini. But he and Stanley Meyer were probably the two first to really bring technology to the fore. And what you see on the bottom is actually a small model based on the schoolgirl model of John Bedini, made by one of our Academy friends in England.
But if you look very carefully now at some of these pyramidal constructs, particularly in Central America, you will see that between the faces of what would be the age of the dinosaur and the age of the computer face, symbolized by the architecture on the left, you will see in between the interesting symbolism of geometries, which for all intents and purposes symbolize the motor and the polar parts of multiple fields. If you have multiple poles and you can collect as well as collapse the magnetic field, you create an induction and implosion that allows vehicles to move through space.
So what Dr. Hurtak's proposing, he actually had said this years ago, and also in the Keys, is that what is being shown here is the fact of electromagnetic energy that was understood and coded into, this is the Aztec Quetzalcoatl Pyramid or Temple of the Feathered Serpent in Teotihuacan. This is in the area near Mexico City.
One of my colleagues in the 1960s was able to build one of these small hovercraft, and he was told by the American Air Force that private air forces were not permitted, and so he had to stop his research. But he's demonstrated proof of principle that without too much advanced, shall we say, economics, small models could be built for transportation. We would call for aerodynamic cars.
But what do they have in Egypt? This is always a question. We'll talk about the Middle East, the Holy Land area. And the Holy Land is also Egypt because Jesus actually went there as a child, and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of Egypt. That's told in Acts 7:22. And you can see that Egypt actually is more than simply the three pyramids. In fact, there's hundreds of pyramids up and down the Nile, and we are coming out with some material on that hopefully by the end of this year.
A new book on Egypt and the underground system.
But what you find also is you find a lot of underground as well, cavities, the tomb of Osiris. You also found a lot of tombs in the area, and you can see it literally from this picture that's very close to...
Again, keep in mind the pyramid was the vortex or vortex Ya for vehicles of higher intelligence. It represents a culture that used the pyramid as a type of touchstone for other energy collection.
And if you go down to the area of the Valley of the Kings, you find on the ceilings of these beautiful tombs a whole entourage of other types of intelligences. I think this is so important. If you look very carefully, we'll say the first row on the lower to the right, the second one has almost a serpent type of head. You go into the middle, you see a bird type of face. You see like lion faces. We don't feel this is just mythology. I think that's what's really important. You see the solar boats on the top areas. We feel that these were really beings that exist in outer space that were connected with the ancient, we'll say the pre-Egyptians in that sense, or pre-dynastic is what they're really called, Egyptians.
The classical part of the Egyptian history. But let me ask you a question, Desiree. Wouldn't this give a reason why the governments of the world have been reluctant to share the higher story of the extraterrestrial presence? I mean, if we have such a diverse group of intelligent forms, some of them highly grotesque, highly animalistic, would it not be to the benefit of major governments not to share certain knowledge that would cause future shock?
Right, and I think that is part of the problem. Let's take a look also with Egypt. This is, I took that picture. Actually, the lintels by Abydos. You can see the famous lintel of the helicopter, the submarine, and we'll call it the spacecraft or the flying vehicle. But what's interesting is in the Hebrew Nagash, which is translated by Bulch, who's an Egyptian scholar, this is one of the Egyptian books, it tells us, amongst the presents that Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba were a vessel wherein one could travel over the sea, and a vessel wherein one could travel by air. So this is literally a translation from a traditional Egyptian scholar about one of the glyphs that he was to interpret.
Fortunately, we were there beneath the lintel. We could see this was something that was not done by modernists or so-called New Age enthusiasts, but it was there in the ancient heritage of Egypt. You look carefully now, on the far right of the screen, you will see that the being with wings or wing-like projections is being visited by what you would call a lower elemental, ET.
Or something with a round head, almost like a head of light or a head of a bulb.
On the other side, we have, as you said, the sphere of light, and then you have the sacred bowl, or the Apis bowl, which represents really the higher spiritual nourishment, and then the four suns, representing really the gates of higher knowledge.
Right, so you have almost a serpent type of intelligence. You have the winged intelligence, and then you have the being of light intelligence.
So do we take food from the serpent type, or do we take food or substance from that which has the spherical mind of higher knowledge?
And what's interesting, of course, the bowl represented the seeds of creation. So he was standing there getting the gift from, we'll say, the light being that was to be given in terms of the seeds of life to humanity.
In simple words, I was able to go underneath the Giza plateau many, many years ago, and I saw these vast corridors and vast rooms, all interconnecting, suggesting again a civil engineering that was superb, far beyond the abilities of those that were living on the surface of Egypt at that time.
Many of you had heard about what took place in December of this last year, 2017, where supposedly there was information that came out that the government had a secret program. And I'll go back to this film, which actually is still in need of funding, called Stranger at the Pentagon. The idea being that a very positive being actually had come to the White House or to the military.
At the Pentagon.
At the Pentagon. And said, you know, can we give you technology, but you need to put away your weapons of war. So anyway, that's that
There was
story.
a conversation given to General Eisenhower, then president, in the early 50s. Of course, the American government at that time did not take the option.
But we want to just preface this because, you know, the Pentagon does know about extraterrestrials, whether it was someone who actually came and told them or their own research.
So what we're saying to you is the keys of Enoch are correct in mentioning this period of time, even though this information was suppressed. It's now coming out 2004, is being used as the lead story to break the most important story yet regarding the extraterrestrial presence on Mother Earth.
I mean, let's face it, we've all been waiting for the U.S. government to come clean. So they didn't quite come clean, but they released some information, mostly because the gentleman you're going to be seeing, actually he had stepped down from his position at the Pentagon, and Harry Reid, who everyone's familiar with as a senator, wanted to also get this information out. So for those of you who didn't follow it, back in December 16th and 17th, this article came out in the front page of the New York Times. And just in short, the first paragraph says, in the $600 billion annual defense budgets, $22 million was spent on advanced aerospace threat identification program, which was almost impossible to find. Now, some of this money also came from Bigelow, who is someone who's helped to fund these projects. Let's take a look first at just what was one of the releases. They did, I think it was about a 10-year program, maybe 7 to 10 years, of collecting information. They had over 20 people going out to sites collecting information. This is from the Navy. And this shows, as you'll see in the video, I hope everyone's being able to watch by this point, you know, some of the movement of this particular vehicle.
So if you watch very carefully under the airplane wings, you'll see the unidentified object. Look carefully at his flight pattern.
Well, the airplane wings is simply a measuring device for the graphic film.
You will see technology far superior to any that would be manufactured by the Americans, the Russians, for that matter, the Europeans.
So let's go forward and see this if we can.
Yeah. Drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
So what's interesting though is there are a couple of objects coming out of the bottom. That's what the Commander David Fowler said. And this also ties in with not only many sightings that have come on throughout the last 40 years or 70 years if you're going to count, but actually, of course, Dr. Hurtak explains this, that actually the vehicles can be one thing and then they can split up into others, into smaller vehicles, so they're not as solid as we think. And I think what's the most interesting is the fact that these vehicles are probably not just 3rd or 4th dimensional all the time, that they're actually also operating in 5th, 6th, even 7th dimensional realities.
We're seeing here from the Keys of Enoch from Key 205, one of the larger vehicles, the tripyramidal and bipyramidal vehicles that have been watched very, very carefully by world government authorities, by specialists, social scientists, and remote sensing experts. We are at a time of a major shift, and the shift is more internal than external. You're seeing these external realities which authorities cannot connect with the dots of a higher awareness, a higher intelligence that is far beyond the technical curve that we are existing on, and is making us aware that we have to reach out to the power of our mind's eye, the power of our inner spiritual / paraphysical vision, to understand that we also are going to be moved in a flash of light into a whole new reality. So the point we're making to you is finally, after 45 years, we have the first official scientific documentation from the Pentagon, the most resourceful area of scientific expertise on this subject, releasing information showing that we are to fasten our seatbelts. We are to prepare for a major change. To use biblical language, we are to fasten up our loins or anoint our bottomless consciousness into a higher consciousness. Quoting Senator Harry Reid, "We don't know the answers, but we have plenty of evidence to support asking the questions." This is about science and national security. If America doesn't take the lead in answering these questions, others will. And of course, this is why astronaut Ed Mitchell, Dr. Scott Jones, who worked with Senator Claiborne Pell and us, Dr. Desiree and Dr. JJ, were interested in working with world leaders and give them briefings as to what we consider to be the spiritual side of the ultra-terrestrial intelligence behind the extraterrestrial. And here I'm connecting my conversation with Paul Hellyer, former defense minister from the government of Canada, the highest ranking G8 spokesperson of cabinet rank, who was not afraid to tell the world community that UFOs are as common as airplanes that fly over us. And here we see pictures on the right of declassified top security documents.
Yeah, so Senator Reid had said that others will release this information. Well, the Ministry of Defense of the UK, England, had already released information in 2013, 2017. Russians have released some information. The Brazilians have released others. The French have released others. So really everyone is waiting for the US to come forward. But again, if we don't, there's going to be more and more that will come out by others. So, but we were very excited. I think most people in this field were very excited by the release in December.
December 16th, according to some reports, others December 5th. Certainly by the end of the month of December, the worldwide was really aware, the worldwide community of viewers, that is, that there was a tip of an iceberg in terms of a consciousness shift that was beginning to take place.
And again, it was all because Elizondo had quit his position with the Pentagon. But you know, you don't always get these things to take with you if they're totally classified. So we feel it's the beginning of a larger release. It was to see how people would react. Actually, I think people reacted pretty well. Most people didn't even react, which is a kind of a sad situation when there's finally some real information that comes out from a higher level of government.
Another area that the Academy has been connected with since the early 70s has been what is happening in the South Pole area of our planet. In Antarctica, the highest continent on Mother Earth, over 8,000 feet above sea level on an average. Here we see members of one of our teams there at the South Pole many, many years ago. Now we have this interesting picture I took many years ago with Elizabeth Clark in South Africa.
Right.
She was with British intelligence observing events there in southern Africa.
And don't forget, South Africa is actually not that far from Antarctica. So she was told from her experience in the 1950s, she was contacted by an alien race while she was in the Drakensberg Mountains. And the alien that really met with her is named Akon. You can see the picture she drew of him. And actually she went inside a spaceship and she went with him to his star, which is Alpha Centauri. And she actually stayed on the planet Meton for 4 months.
While traveling to his star, the commander told her, quote, "My name is Sharon." He said in a deep, gentle voice, quote, "My ancestors remained on Earth to study the Pleistocene cycle of solar expansion approximately 1.75 million years ago to 11,000 years ago. They constructed a beautiful underground city where they survived the intense radiations. Moving into the heart of the great mountains of the southern continent, they maintain our civilization there. Even to this epoch on Earth, our spaceships come and go, retaining this base within the vast oasis of Antarctica," end of quote.
So again, her experience with this was in the 50s. She wrote about it in the late 70s. Now, of course, more and more information is coming out of what is in Antarctica. Let's go to show you just a few things. Well, one of the interesting things going on, which also looks at the Keys of Enoch, is something called the Ice Cube Project. And what these are is they've actually placed sensors deep, deep, deep underneath the Antarctic. It's very, very pure water. And muons that actually come all the way from the stars, as well as neutrinos, when they come through the planet, are actually picked up on these little sensor devices. And it's amazing because some of the scientists are getting, not from muons, but from some of the neutrinos, a very, very sharp and strong energy.
What does this mean?
Receiving. Well, it's just an amazing project that's going on there, really analyzing the power of muons, which are a key part of the Keys of Enoch.
And of course, the South Pole and the North Pole, according to Enoch, are places where higher intelligence would land because, should we say, there's no Allen belts, densities around these areas. In other words, they're open hole, if you can think of it, as regions in much of a donut-shaped geometry around Mother Earth.
But there is something that you can see in the lower, we'll say the lower right of the Antarctic continent. It's called the Wilkes Land Gravity Anomaly. And this was picked up by these gray satellites that are measuring gravity all over the Earth. And they discovered this in 2006, that there's actually this really strange gravity phenomena, almost like, we'll say, the Bermuda Triangle type of thing, or there's also one in the Devil's Triangle, I think something over Dragon Triangle.
So to read the capsulization, it stretches for a distance of 151 miles across and has a maximum depth of about 2,782 feet or 848 meters. Some researchers believe it is the remains of a truly massive asteroid, which was more than twice the size of Chicxulub meteorite, which wiped out the dinosaurs and landed, of course, in that eastern part of Yucatan. If this explanation is true, it would mean that this killer asteroid caused the Permian-Triassic extinction event, which killed 96% of the Earth's sea creatures and up to 70% of the vertebrate organisms living on land. So again, I want to point out this information on the South Pole because I was involved many years ago in research with very high levels of government and foreign researchers. In fact, one of our colleagues, Sandra Singer, was in the South Pole area doing research for more than 12 years, suggesting there was certainly nothing on the surface that would indicate there were monster beings under the ice. And so a lot of this research of the Keys is important because we want to tell people there are positive changes coming our way and not negative beings under the ice, which would be a way of back engineering an explanation by the American government of why they haven't told people the truth.
But
The truth is there are positive forces and there are negative forces. The positive forces are far more numerous than the negative, and we must gird up our loins, or to use spiritual positive psychology, to make the adjustments necessary, knowing that we are being invited to see the history of our planet very quickly, to make a synoptic snapshot of the past that our ancestors recognized. There were places of visitation. All cultures knew this. But also to accept the invitation to work together as a team and to begin to build bridges of understanding with the off-planetary intelligence that's coming more into the visible.
So, but not to be negative, but if this was an asteroid that wiped out, we'll say the marine mammals, you can see here 96% is the middle line, the Permian to Triassic. You can see the dates of this. So there were 5 mass extinctions according to geologists, and many people think we're in the 6th mass extinction. But who's causing it or why? I don't know. I just thought this was interesting. There's more and more we're finding that there were other unique animals on this planet, even a lot actually in North America before the North American extinction. But here's a unicorn rhino type of animal that existed just 29,000 years ago, up to 350,000 years ago in Siberia. That was recently been uncovered. So there's many other animals that have been around, and because of the extinction series, that there's been a lot of wipeouts, a lot of changes. Again, North America had some very unusual animals that we don't see today because of the North American extinction.
When we were in South America many years ago, we met with Professor Cabrera, and we're looking now at one of his unique stones showing dinosaurs and humans living side by side.
In fact, you see it like a human or humanoid riding a dinosaur. I mean, this may be too far out because 65 million years ago is an awful long time ago. But nevertheless, there's several stones that show both people and dinosaurs together. So whether we went that far back or whether we
Most anthropologists would not take this serious. They would say this is the quiet musings of a old professor.
Or whether we just go back, and this is interesting because in terms of hominids, beings that are a little bit what they would say prior to man being here.
The Homo erectus, the Homo sapien sapien.
Well, the oldest that they would go back to was in Chad, and that was just short of 7 million years ago. In Africa, of course, Chad is in Africa, but now they're actually finding this.
The Glycopithecus, the 7 million year old tooth that illustrates the hominid that lived in the area of Athens, discovered in 1944. This ties in with other situations that our colleagues have seen in North Africa and East Africa.
So they found actually a jawbone in Greece and a tooth in Bulgaria. And what's interesting about the tooth is that many of the very primitives, we'll say like a chimpanzee type of genetic line, would have actually several roots for this tooth. But you can see in the Bulgarian one, it's just one. And that makes it seem like they were more connected with us. But actually, Key 402, which is the new Keys of Enoch Dr. Hurtak has released, explains some of this. But what's interesting here, more than anything, is that Europe, going back 7 million years ago, had what could be types of hominid intelligence. This is something that had never been considered. Out of Africa was supposed to take place just about that time, or even shortly after.
Back in the 1960s, one of my students worked with Louis B. and Mary Leakey in East Africa, and the findings that they came up with in Ethiopia and parts of Tanganyika suggested intelligence going back 1.2, 1.3 million years ago. That is to say, proto-human intelligence. Why are we saying this to you? Well, there are reptilian-like beings in outer space. There are beings that would explain really the gods of these strange animals.
And 402 explains that there were many hominids that existed on the earth. You know, we're one species of about 4 or 5 or even 6. If you take Homo florensis, Homo naledi, Neanderthals, some of which have mixed our genes, Cro-Magnon, many of these other species
So
actually
what we're saying
existed.
to all of you is the keys of Enoch represent a map of a new biological textbook that's being fulfilled. We are working with cultural anthropologists, paleontologists, archaeologists in the key areas of the world at this time to show the earlier story of the human race. And strange as it may seem, one area close to us now in California, San Diego, where mastodon bones were moved from their location to an interesting pattern by humans some 130,000 years ago. Tell us the story.
Right, so they don't think it's maybe Homo sapiens, but some hominids also existed in San Diego 130,000 years ago. So what's this doing? Well, this is actually confirming the keys that said there were many civilizations, there were previous cultures, they didn't have to be advanced, they can be primitive, but they existed throughout the planet. It wasn't just a slow evolution. In fact, we feel it wasn't even an evolution. Some of it was really coming from outer space, coming here, doing experiments of planet
But why are
Earth.
these bones in this position?
Well, that was the question. That shows that there was some humanoid life that actually put them into that configuration.
So there were ceremonies, there were trade-offs, and recognizing that there were other life forms interconnecting with the human race.
We're running out of little time here, so I just want to say I for all those people that were living up in New York and in Boston, this is what your recent storm looked like. I think some of you know that, but it's important that everyone is aware of what's taking place on the planet in terms of
massive
weather.
climate change,
And
abrupt.
It's not just happening in Maine, this is all for 2018, and of course we're only talking here January 7th. You have Maine on the top and you have France on the bottom. So you have lots of changes going on. We have fires out here in California. Basically, there's a lot that's taking place.
So this is the theme of our seminar with you, our web talk. What is the nature of our universe? We're going through cataclysmic change in the external. We're also going through quantum change in the internal. We're being fashioned or refashioned as psychonauts. Just as we have astronauts in the external, we are in the internal side being prepared to go into new time space, to go into higher dimensions, to go into frequencies of light and recognize that the divine, the eternal mind, has created a variety of evolutions of which we are in the physical. Those in the transphysical, the ultraphysical, the keys of Enoch called the higher evolution, are now returning to the scene of the experiment. We are being upgraded, so to speak. We are being given consciousness options that will be placed on the table by the world governments. And certainly what Desiree and I have done over the last 45 years is being recognized in some scientific circles. What is the mantra we would like to share with you today with the book called Mind Dynamics, which is our work with Stanford Research Institute scientists doing top secret research that cost over $20 million over a 20-year period, showing that we could see through time-space relationships without the use of technology. That mantra is Ruach Shamayim,
Which means spirit of the heavens.
So as we see Mother Earth in terms of the majesty as one vortex jewel within millions upon millions, as we see life as a mandala, a type of cosmic picture of which we are cosmic citizens, spiritual in origin but material in our present embodiment, going into the next phase of our education. Let us call upon the Ruach Shamayim 12 times for the 12 divisions of humanity, the 12 historic tribes of Israel, which became the symbol of the dimensions of cosmic humanity, and the 12 meridians of our body, which represent the paraphysical dimensions, known to the occidental system of acupuncture science.
So we like everyone to join us in this mantra.
Ruach Shamayim, 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 Ruach Shamayim. Again, we feel the vibration of what the ancient Greek philosophers taught, the music of the spheres. We are all musical instruments in the house of the divine. The way we use our energy, the way we use our knowledge, gives us the options, the real options for a new future, a better life.
Every moment we are free to choose to use our good mind or to go along with other realities that are influencing us. This is really the shift that we have to understand when we know who we are and our greater potential. That we don't have to be influenced by the local flotsam and jetsam. We can be influenced by the divine lords of light.
Working with the office of the Christ, illustrated in the great science within the spiritual metaphor we find in both Old and New Testaments. We have thus the option of going with the ultra-terrestrial, we would call in the Eastern tradition the avatars of light, in the Near Eastern tradition the angels and the archangels of glory, or take our time with the experimental gods.
Now let me say that recently, and this came out just this last year, something called the Blue Brain Project in Switzerland's Institute of Technology. And if you look, okay, on the left side is your standard neurons. But on the right side is what they're starting to see is really taking place in our brains. And what do you see there? You see amazing geometries, and that's really what's taking place.
Look carefully at the geometries and look at the next graph that we're showing you in terms of the 5D and 6D and 7D.
So it's really saying that the brain is probably processing, at least in geometries that are beyond the second or third dimension, but even up into the seventh dimension. What do the keys say about this? Key 214 verse 19 tells us, these light pictographs work through yod, that's like flames, yod-like pulsations, centered within repeating pyramidal patterns, extending through all space, time, and matter. So that's really how we're working with these pictographs, with these extended repeating pyramidal patterns that are penetrating into our reality. So that's how our mind thinks. It's not thinking in just a third dimension. We've cut ourselves off to limit and see ourselves as only a three-dimensional thinking computer.
So 4 being the arbitrary time of our biological clocks means under certain conditions, as our mind speeds up, as our consciousness is used on higher levels of experience, paraphysically speaking, we go into a 5th, 6th, and even 7th-dimensional area of knowledge.
So people say, well, what can you do with this? Well, we can start seeing ourselves as more than a three-dimensional reality. Now, virtual reality or augmented reality is starting to show us we can see and experience more. But we really can. So if we know that, if we really know that we are more than a 2 or 3-dimensional thinking computer just with inside our brain that we have learned from the past, if we can go outside that box and see that we are really conscious divine beings reaching into multi-dimensional realities, we have a greater ability.
We see the different dimensions of color and consciousness interconnecting with what we will call augmented reality. We live here in the midst of Silicon Valley. We know many of the top specialists.
And companies like Google and IBM are trying to combine AI and machine learning. So we really have to see the really differences that are taking place with this. There's some positive things going on the planet, and as some of you are watching, there's also beautiful things taking place with the butterflies that are flying. It's interesting that the key 313 talks about in creating a compatible network of spatial provisions, you go through the way of Shen, of the visual world, still within the mental pathways controlled by seraphs. In breaking through the mechanistic functions of the visible world, the material form is seen as the housing for superior consciousness states. In seeing the difference between I have a body and I am a body, you can use your light for the benefit of all beings.
So without scientific ethics, which are missing in Western science, without consciousness and spirituality being augmented also, we are then the plaything of the technical minds and robots who indeed can, through the collecting of data, recursive operations, within millionths of a second, outdistance the human at everything. So we are actually creating, as it were, the monster child if we think that our future is in the hands of the robots. No, we have shown through our research of colleagues and with other colleagues in Europe that mind over matter does work. And these are the gifts that we have in this generation, using what I call the Geller effect, mind over matter, or what the Old and New Testament refer to the gifts of the higher mind, or the neshama of the Holy Spirit. With this power, we can forge new futures. We don't have to compromise ourselves with technical elites. We certainly do not have to buy our way into higher knowledge. It is a free gift through God's divine mind and consciousness that's embedded within us if we evoke this through sacred language and self-realization.
But let's go down to the differences between humans and robots. Well, basically, we feel, we have love, we have emotions. The second aspect is really more profound. We have the ability to remote view without technology. In fact, Alan Steinfeld was on Coast to Coast last night. It was very interesting because someone called in and said, my grandmother keeps seeing things, and she warned me one time not to go on a fishing trip. She says the boat's going to capsize. So he listened. He didn't go on the fishing trip, and people literally died on the fishing trip because the boat capsized. So how do we do that? And that's precognition. It's not based on determinism. It's really based on the fact that we can really tap into a whole other reality. It's a higher consciousness mind that we are a part of. So remember.
So these points tell us we can tap into the consciousness domain. That domain is the work of the Holy Spirit, or the universe of the Holy Spirit, which is the field of similitude that goes with the divine image, as we illustrate in our books, one of which is the Over Self-Awakening. So we're seeing here a young woman in a state of meditation at the bottom of the screen. As she creates the vibratory field around her body, she's able to pulsate her mental thoughts, her precognition, her futuristic visions take on form, and she's pulsating part of our consciousness now into a higher vibratory field. And from that, she's awakening to the communication with these beings of light, these ultra-terrestrials, the ultra-celestials, beings that, for want of better metaphor, the ancients would simply call the visitors, the messengers, the Greek word angelos, messenger from the higher worlds or dimensions. We're seeing this now. So we must, again, smell the coffee. We must understand what the government now is beginning to release. We must thank the authorities for at least the opportunity to share the information from a much wider perspective, but we must see that pertains to each of us. We are the ones who are the recipients of this to do something with the knowledge. We are the ones who are part of this eternal inheritance. Again, as we see through the cosmogram of Mel Lyon and yours truly, we see the aspects of the Divine Mother, which is the invisible inner side of consciousness, seen as the Divine Feminine of co-creation or co-evolution.
And this is key 303. Let us read it for a minute and let us see ourselves literally partaking of the keys. No longer just read the keys. As Dr. Hurtak has said to many of you, we need to experience the keys. We need to have that consciousness that takes us outside of our three-dimensional threshold. So it says the keys to future luminaries are whole light beings who will give energy codes for limitless intercommunication between living universes and the power of righteousness. That means we have the ability to get those codes of light, to get the information that can take us beyond the physical reality. It also, righteousness and compassion, which hold love-powered radiations together in the cycles of the eternal inheritance. So let us feel those love-powered radiations. Let us be the power of righteousness and compassion. Let us share that energy. Now I'm going to ask Michael Doden to come back. He's going to give us some keyboards to go along with our closing meditation.
The Hebrew on the screen is Shekinah or Shekinah. And what you've seen in the beings of light, their whole body is covered by light, just as your body can be covered by light. We see this also with the yods over the heads, which represents a higher spectrum of light, we would call superluminal light. We see also the sacred geometries of the balance between body, mind, and spirit. Each of us is a Trinity body. Each one of us is a Christed being if we accept God's word and blessing, an opportunity to go into the future through nonviolence, to go into the future through higher wisdom, to go into the future through unconditional love. This is the recipe for connecting with those of the higher worlds. If we have love, we do not attract negativity. And we tell the negative ETs that show that to go their way. This is not for them. We resolve to take the higher path.
So let us see ourselves as those who are watching can see in the vision, really receiving the gift of the higher garment.
We see here in humility, each one of us changing our garments of flesh for garments of light, the changing of the garments. We see the angelic messenger or the interdimensional being carrying the sign of the cross or space-time conversion. And out of the mouth is the projection of the words, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord."
So we thank everyone for being with us as we move into our closing meditation.
Climate change, we see the oceans flux.
And
we see also the spheres of light with the angelic presence of the dove. We see the image of the cosmic Christ of the greater universe.
And we are now introduced to our brothers and sisters from higher worlds who seek only to assist us. Some are from the stars, others are spiritual guides or angelic beings. They have been waiting patiently for us, that means for you, to awaken. But until this time, we have ignored them. Let us awaken now.
And see the large and joyous picture of life, the hands that have been synchronized and synergized. To use the keys of Enoch, the inductive symphony of inner sounds. We reach deep levels of synchronicity when we tune into the still small sacred space within ourselves. During daily meditation and prayer, and we listen, for there we also can discover peace and sanctuary, for we are the temple of understanding.
And I know many of us have felt that synchronicity with life, now empowering us to do more. We can feel it when we are in the right place at the right time.
Many have seen the external world and temples. Many have seen the external churches, magnificent like that at Chartres in France, showing the labyrinth and showing the fantastic geometric wonders. We see this also in the great cathedrals of Russia, Germany, and throughout the world. And yet we are the missing piece. We are the capstone of the Christ when we become the real light bodies. When we realize our body is the temple of divine spirit. We are the light bodies of the Shekinah, the divine presence.
And so let us say together the Shekinah. I'll let Dr. Hurtak begin and then join together and be that light presence connected with the Most High. Feel your image joined with your higher similitude in that greater presence.
And as you watch the screen, those of you who can see it, feel the light vibrations move from your legs up through your solar plexus, forming the sign of the covenant, and then through your arms reach higher and higher. Reach majestically into the sky with the upward and outward thrusts. And see the great sphere of light over your head, which is the awakening of your overself, with the angelic notations of Shekinah, 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 Shekinah. And now feel the pulses of light from the top of your head come down through your spine, activating your fingertips, activating your legs, your feet, your toes. See yourself as an expression of the plurality of the divine.
Right, see yourself as one with the face of the Divine Mother. And see all of us together as radiations of her garment.
The coming of the cosmic Christ is also the realization of the vehicle that Christ used, which is the Divine Mother, the Maria Sophia in the Greek. The mother who gave birth to higher knowledge. The mother who gave birth to the symbol of the feminine principle of life, without which we cannot nourish or give birth or have coevolution. Let this symbol and let the radiant Christ be with us in the gathering of nations and tribes.
And feel the beings of light over your heads. See the golden white capstone also glowing and activating your Kether template. Let us realize we are never alone. We are surrounded by light. We are surrounded by higher vibrations. We are surrounded by the infinite way.
And finally, we are surrounded by fellowship. And that is the key of the consciousness shift. We go into the future together as a family of light. We work overcoming ignorance and separation as a fellowship of light. We join our work with the B'nai Or and B'nai Elohim, the ancient prophetic words for the brothers and sisters of light in fellowship. And we realize that our body vehicle, our incarnate self, is the fellowship of many vehicles, from the material body to the vibratory, atomic and subatomic, to the mental, to the musical, to the superluminal. The keys of Enoch called the Zohar. We are a vibratory set of bodies according to the divine image. And thus, whether we use the Eastern or Western tradition, ultimately through self-realization, we reclaim our cosmic path.
Take a moment and close your eyes and feel the energy bodies around you, both around you on the sides and also above you, above your head. Feel yourself expand into the infinite presence and know that you are no longer just a body, but you are a consciousness reality, experiencing temporarily a physical form. And as we do that, we are able to see and experience the light.
The yod that appeared around my body when I was in Mexico by the pyramids. The yod that was there, indicative of the power of sacred language, of Yod He Vod He, the Divine Father, who spoke to the prophets and the apostles and the mystics and the poets through a higher language of sounds. And there in the midst of the light is the shield. With the shield, the garment. With the garment, the blessing. That the La Paloma, the dove, was there with us when we gathered as the Amishadai, the people of light. And as we have used the divine names as we gather in all the sacred places throughout the world to anoint once again with the name of the Father, the names of the Son, the names of the Holy Spirit, to the Shekhinah, the divine presence has returned. The divine gathering has begun. And now the governments and powers and authorities of the world shall understand
how beyond the circuitries of our body and mind, we enter the higher dimensions of thought form creativity and operate as one with the eternal mind of the I Am. This is not just words on a page. This is actually, we'll say, guidance to make ourselves part of the higher dimensions of thought and to operate as one with that eternal mind. Again, let us see ourselves in bodies of glory that are beyond the physical form. And let us call forth the power of the Goia Christu, the body of light.
Goia Christu, Goia Christu, Goia Christu, Goia Christu, bring together the Aramaic and the Greek, we see in the picture the woman within us, the female nature. Her face must be uncovered. Her voice must sing. The spheres, the vortex around her body must create the wheels within the wheels. And we see beneath the image of ourself, at the very bottom of a multiple set of bodies, the bluish purple representing the paraphysical, the avatar, representing the superangelic, representing the Christed nature that we shall enter into as we become cosmic citizens in the future and understand our brothers and sisters who have returned to the scene of the experiments to bless us, to nourish us, and to give us in the twinkling of an eye a search for the fullness of God's word at work.
And so the principal question is, how are we to hold, maintain, sustain, and use the living light? But it's through the power that is within us. And the question is also, of course, what have we learned after 45 years of the Keys of Enoch? But how to be the light, and who we are as beings on this planet that did not evolve from the flotsam and jetsam of planet Earth, but actually came here as beings to assist and to bring the light to this planetary system. And we still have that innate potential within us through the Chokhmah, through the wisdom connected with the power of Mikaelu. Let us simply chant this if we can. Chokhmah Mikaelu. 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 Chokhmah Mikaelu.
The ancient words in the Hebrew and what we call the Paleo-Semitic, finding Michael's name in ancient documents in Syria, Mikaelu, of Michael. Yes, Michael mentioned in the book of Daniel chapter 12 is to stand up on behalf of the humans seeking the light. Michael represents the protector of the human race. It is the vibration of his knowledge that has inspired the great poets and scholars. And now his name inspires us as we share the chalice beneath us and above us. The chalice with the human evolution connected with the chalice of the higher evolution. The chalice of our body, the Christ itself, and the chalice of the eternal Christ as we see in the image.
So let us also encompass the East and the West with the power of the Om, the Am, and the Ummah. So the Om, we all know, is that one sound, that original sound that brought all things together. The Am, the Buddhist power that brings to light the power of oneness, and the Ummah. And recently we were talking to a Tibetan, and the Tibetan said Ummah not only in the Middle East means the community, but for the Tibetans it also means that coming together into oneness.
We behold the light body of the many colors. Behold these sounds. I will intone them together just briefly. Om, Am, Ummah. Once again. Om, Am, Ummah. A third time. Om, Am, Ummah. We see the vibrations that create the colors within our mind's eye. We see the pictures of our light body. Begin to understand the vision of Joseph's coat of many colors in the book of Genesis. We are going into in Genesis. We are understanding the languages of the world. And carefully reading the book of Esther in the Old Testament, we understand that God's word reached India, and so we understand the importance of the Sanskrit. The Eastern vibrations in the Paleo-Iranian and Indo-European languages are part of the opening of the egg of history, the shining forth of knowledge, the opening to the future. Yea, we need to maintain our consciousness awareness, to be awake in each moment, and thus we awake to our greater self, our true self.
And so let us take a minute to put the dove of peace around the planet. Everywhere in the planet. From the Middle East
to the Far East, from the Far East to South and North America, from these places to the Pacific, to the Arctic and the Antarctic, that all the hidden knowledge will be revealed, even that underneath the Antarctic, and that within the waste of Canada and the Arctic. North America and Europe will reveal previous generations in touch with their brothers or brotherhoods of light. In the image of the dove we go forth. In the image of the dove we conquer. In the image of the dove we understand the mystery of the language of the Holy Spirit. For through the dove over our head we are baptized through God's holy name into the work that has called us into existence. May all of His holy names of Hashem bless us as we see the spheres of light with brothers and sisters.
and our sister Colleen, she took this picture that there's more than one being around us. There can be myriads of beings, myriads of orbs, myriads of jewels. When we use the sacred names, when we use the vibrations of light. And so see ourselves surrounded by many. See ourselves also in the midst of not just the extraterrestrials, but the ultra-terrestrial realms of life. The beings that have no physical form as we know it. The beings that don't take a physical vehicle as we know it.
The vehicles and the faces become one. And so we bless you. We ask the Kadush Adonai, as we say in the Ethiopic language of our pilgrimage by many members of the Academy to Ethiopia now,
later this month,
to open up the sacred churches in Addis Ababa, the 11 churches of historical knowledge regarding the books of Enoch, the higher teachings hidden from many churches of the West, but revealed to the Near Eastern and the African churches. The Spirit of God is moving upon the world. The vehicles of light shall come, and the holiness of God and the Lord shall be known in the Kadush Adonai, in the Kadush Adonai, in the Kadush Adonai. And seeing this ring increase in size and scope, and seeing the other cosmic celestials, the cosmic future, the cosmic revelation is now being shared openly. Take the chalice. Take the higher path. See the multiplicity of trees. See trees within trees, eyes within eyes, hearts within hearts. See the great and glorious vision.
And so as we bring the trees of life together,
as we acknowledge the Father of all eternity,
let us say as a final expression,
Anastasis Theou,
Anastasis Christou.
Phonetically written, I will sing it. Anastasis Theou, Anastasis Christou, Anastasis Theou, Anastasis Christou, Anastasis Theou, Anastasis Christou. May the vibrations bless us, keep us, allow us the true angelic contacts, allow us the true preparation of discernment, that we shall be there with the wayshowers, from the Father of all fatherhoods, from the Mother of all motherhoods, from the Christ of all Christed ones.
And so let us close with the 4 great amens as we visualize the dove of peace.
Over the Arctic and over the Antarctic, the opening of the doors of ancient knowledge, the chambers of the deep is now being made possible.
And literally holding planet Earth in oneness.
We say, looking quietly at the 4 corners, the cardinal points, our brothers and sisters in the east, the west, the north, and the south. Amen. 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 and amen.
And so if thoughts become things, choose the good ones. We just want to close with a few thoughts. Again, join us on Facebook, both Keys of Enoch and The Keys of Enoch. If you have interesting questions you want to answer or pose, let us know. And that's The Keys of Enoch. You can comment to people about some of the questions we've also posed. Please join us if you can, and always donate to the Academy. We are a nonprofit, and it helps us to get out more and more and more books. Dr. Hurtak, as I mentioned, was
especially our films, our music, some of the new albums, of course, from Carlos Santiago, in terms of peace, love, and joy.
And Full of Grace. You can see that album. That's
with the dove at the
latest.
top. Immortal Sounds from Brazilian singers, and from Germany, from Jocelyn Smith, in particular, one of the finest female singers in Europe, the names of the Divine Mother. And if I may read this in closing, it's just one verse of Psalm 133. How good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. I add in parentheses, how good it is for brothers and sisters to gather together in unity. So you have books there of the divine names. These will take you into the Hebrew, the Aramaic, the Greek languages in particular, and show you the scientific relevance of what is happening in fulfillment of that divine blueprint sent forth in 1973. Over 40 years in the desert, now people are coming back and realizing the truth of the keys, including what the government has said about the year 2004. We are being prepared for a cosmic awareness of cosmic creation in the real sense, that every one of you is somebody of importance. Every one of you has a place amongst the millions and the trillions of planetary systems of life. You are part of the divine image. You are part of the divine similitude or energy field. You are part of the divine language of the holy name. So use them, and you will see miracles at work, and certainly a positive upper path, a staircase to the heavens, as William Blake, and others have pictured down through the centuries. May you be blessed.
We want to thank Janet Ferris and Michael Doden for their live music tonight.
God loves you, and so do we. Until next time, keep singing the holy names, studying the higher teaching, understanding the marriage taking place between the spiritual and the scientific. That is the future, and that is your future, and that is why the keys of Enoch were given. Amen, 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 and amen.
Again, thank everyone for joining us. See you next month.